Darling, you send me.
Let's do this.
I know you send me. Darling, you send me. I know you send me. Darling, you send me. I know you send me. Darling, you send me. Darling, you send me. I know.
These are the 9 bottles that I grabbed from my house last week when a wildfire decided to start up right next to my neighborhood and get about 2 streets away from my house. It was terrifying, as you might have guessed, and I'm sure a lot of you watching this channel have probably been through a wildfire experience and had to evacuate yourself all of the sudden. We went from me taking a video of planes doing drops on the other side of my neighborhood to my entire street being filled with smoke and us having to get the fuck out in about 20 to 25 minutes. And it was terrifying. And I do want to start off today by saying thank you to all the firefighters that are just absolute superheroes for saving my house, saving my neighbors' houses. It's unbelievable how well they held that line in 60 to 70 mile an hour winds. I feel very lucky that the firefighters responded as fast as they did. But I do want to say I found it interesting later that night after I evacuated and I'm digging through that bag that I just threw aside, and these 9 bottles were in it. And I didn't remember at the time grabbing the bottles that I did. I had no idea what I grabbed. And some of these were easy picks. You don't want to waste a Macallan 18. You don't want to waste a Yamazaki 12. The less than obvious one that I found in that bag later was this, which is Balcones Brimstone. And if you don't know what Balcones Brimstone is, it's one of the more divisive whiskeys, I would say, in the whiskey world because it tastes like liquid campfire. And probably 70% of the people that drink it absolutely despise it because, again, it tastes like liquid campfire. But I happen to love it, and one of the main reasons I do is because it makes the best whiskey Coke on planet Earth. And to me, my comfort drink of choice has always been a whiskey Coke. And it's a lot simpler than many of the drinks you've seen on this channel while we talk football. But to me, sometimes the simplest things really do make me the happiest. And so I want to say, again, thank you to the firefighters that saved my house. Thank you to the firefighters that saved my neighbors' houses. I really, I owe you guys everything. If you're a firefighter that watches this channel, please let me know. And I want to shout you guys out at some point because you guys are fucking superheroes. You really are. So again, thank you. And with that, now that we're happy, we're comfortable, we got our whiskey Coke, let's talk some football. So I had an interesting exchange on Twitter last week, and I was working on a Buda Baker film room at the time because why not? It's Buda Baker. Everybody loves Buda. He's having an amazing season, arguably a Defensive Player of the Year frontrunner, as long as Aaron Donald and Myles Garrett don't keep going Super Saiyan. He's got a decent shot. I thought it was going to be a great episode, and so I posted some stats on Twitter that I pulled off of Pro Football Focus, comparing Buda Baker's insane production to many other defensive superstars from around the league, one of which was Tyrann Mathieu. Lo and behold, a few hours later, Tyrann Mathieu somehow finds the tweet and responds to it, saying that it's wrong. What he disagreed with was the statistics that PFF has for him as giving up 16 catches at that time on the year. For what it's worth, now that we're done with week 8, they have him as giving up 19 catches. Either way, Tyrann doesn't like that number. Jonathan Jones from the Patriots chimed in, and then the comment section kind of devolved into an anti-PFF hate fest. And I was kind of a neutral party in the whole thing. It's not like I did the stats myself. You know, obviously PFF, they have a whole lot of guys that can represent themselves. They don't need me to defend them to Tyrann Mathieu of all people. Nor does Tyrann Mathieu need me to defend him from PFF. I'm just kind of the guy in the middle here. But it did kind of bring up an interesting point, and that's who was right here. Obviously, there's a dispute in terms of the accuracy of the statistics. Clearly, somebody's got to be right. Was Tyrann Mathieu really not giving up that many catches, or was PFF correct and he was? And so I kind of took it upon myself as a neutral party to actually investigate this, watch every single snap of the Chiefs defense, including last week against the Jets in week 8, and compare that to the number of catches that Pro Football Focus has Tyrann Mathieu giving up. And full disclosure, I was talking to the guys from PFF while I was watching this defense, including Ben Stockwell, who's their director of analysis, way high up in the company, because I wanted to get their perspective as well in terms of how they assign blame on certain plays, how they grade things, if the stats and the grades have anything to do with one another. I really wanted to get full context here and not just go into it blind and just kind of doing my own charting. And it was actually very illuminating because, believe it or not, both Tyrann Mathieu and Pro Football Focus are technically kind of sort of correct. And what I mean by correct is that Tyrann Mathieu is 100% right, that he has not given up 19 catches. In the traditional sense of losing on a rep, just flat out getting beaten, he has not lost and given up a catch 19 times. And in fact, according to my charting, he's really only given up 6 catches on the year in the traditional sense of losing a rep. And for full transparency's sake, I am going to walk through all 6 of these catches because if Tyrann Mathieu somehow finds this video and disputes it, I want to be able to show, no, he really did give up all 6 of these catches. The first catch that he gave up for the year was against the Chargers. It was in a Tampa 2 look where he was playing the deep middle hole. Some people call that the pole runner, depending on what coaches you're talking to. Either way, Tyrann was playing in the deep middle. Keenan Allen went up there and caught an absolutely ridiculous ball from Justin Herbert. To be honest, in my opinion, even though Tyrann did lose on the rep here, it was more of a good offensive play than a bad defensive play. He was in position, he located Keenan, outstretched arm and everything. The ball just barely grazed his fingertips, and it was a great catch from Keenan Allen as well. So even though that was a rep lost, and I had to count that catch against him, he didn't really get burned. Justin Herbert just made a phenomenal throw, which obviously he's done quite a bit this year. The second catch that he gave up for the year was on kind of a fake swing screen against New England, which is a play that we see all over college football, and it's kind of permeated throughout the NFL now too. Obviously, we saw it a lot, ironically, with Justin Herbert at Oregon, where it's really more punishing defenses that have seen screens over and over and over again, and then you catch them with a pump and go right when they least expect it. It's more about good offensive design than I would say bad defense, but again, I have to credit it against Mathieu because he's the one that bit on the pump fake and then obviously got beat by Julian Edelman for 19 yards. Is it really awful? No, but it is a rep loss, so I have to count it against him. The third catch that he gave up for the year was also against New England. It was a 25-yard seam route to Damiere Byrd, and this was, in my opinion, less about Tyrann getting beat, even though he did get beat, but it was more of a great change-up to a staple offensive concept that New England runs over and over again. Tyrann is obviously very familiar with it, having played against New England a lot, and again, they've run this for years. He was kind of expecting to see a route combination that they call Haas, which is a hitch and a seam, where the seam kind of bends to the boundary and becomes almost like a slot fade. Again, New England runs that more than probably anybody else. But this time, Byrd stemmed the route outside like he was taking it to the boundary for a fade, got Mathieu to flip and overplay to the boundary, and then he bent it back inside for a great adjustment on the inside seam route. Again, it's a bad rep for Mathieu technically because he did lose in coverage, but I can also understand why he lost in coverage because he was set up from years and years and years of tape study looking at them run that Haas concept. The fourth catch that Tyrann has given up this year is one that you've all probably seen by now. It's the 60-yard touchdown to Henry Ruggs against the Raiders. And this one, yeah, he straight up got beat. But it's also kind of understandable in the sense that Henry Ruggs runs 4-2. Again, you get him matched up one-on-one on a Yankee concept. It's 4-2 versus 4-5-5. What do you expect? I don't understand what the major... oh, no, that's not yours. You can't have that. Where was I? Right, I don't understand what the main takeaway from that play is other than Henry Ruggs is really fucking fast and Tyrann Mathieu isn't. That's just kind of a tip your hat play to me. You say, good job, you called the right play, you got us, and we move on. It's not really that big of a deal. You just have to acknowledge that Tyrann Mathieu is not that fast and Henry Ruggs is really fucking fast. Now, the last 2 catches that he's given up were on option routes this past week to Braxton Berrios out of the backfield, where again, it's a choice route where Tyrann has to establish leverage and then Berrios can cut any direction he wants to off of that leverage. It's really, really hard to cover for anybody, let alone Tyrann, who I think is a pretty good nickel DB in man coverage situations, but Braxton Berrios is very, very quick, and if you give Berrios a three-way go, honestly, there's not a whole lot of guys in the league that I think can cover that. Either way, it was 2 gains for less than 10 yards each. Again, not really that big of a deal. So on the whole, you have 6 catches, one of which was an amazing throw by Justin Herbert. You have a great play design against New England. You have a route adjustment to break tendencies also against New England. You have Henry Ruggs being Henry Ruggs for the Raiders, and then you have 2 option routes for Braxton Berrios. If those are the only catches that you really give up in an 8-game period, that's less than 1 catch a game. In my opinion, that's not that bad. So now you may be wondering, okay, Brett, where are the other 13 catches coming from then? Why is there such a huge discrepancy between the 6 catches that you have down for Tyrann and the 19 catches that PFF has for Tyrann? Why is there such a big difference? And I will get to that in a second. I'm kind of being interrupted by my cat here. This is Fatty, by the way, one of 2 of my cats. He was the first thing that I grabbed in the fire, so trust me, the whiskey was not the first thing I grabbed. It was this little monster. He's been with me for 10 years, and he's been very freaked out for the last week, so I'm just going to let him sit on my lap because just like a whiskey Coke makes me comfortable, sitting on my lap makes him comfortable. So I'm just going to kind of let him hang out while I talk about Tyrann Mathieu. Now, again, back to the question at hand. Why is there such a big discrepancy? And to me, I think it's because PFF has a different way for how they assign blame to catches. And the other 13 catches that they have him giving up, to me, kind of fall into 2 other categories that aren't really on Tyrann. The first category, and there was 8 catches of this variety, are the kind of manufactured production that Tyrann didn't really have a true shot to stop in the first place. Stuff like screens and rubs and option routes. Like if he's in a zone and there's an option where you can just kind of bend the route away from him against his leverage. Again, there's nothing he can really do about that if he's inside leverage in match quarters and then somebody takes a speed out when he's like 4 or 5 yards inside of them. There's nothing realistically that he can do about that. That's gonna be a reception. Or in another case, if they're lined up in blitz 0, like they were on a 10-yard catch to Will Fuller in the Houston game, and Deshaun Watson actually identified that they were coming with a blitz 0 look, meaning they're bringing 7 guys or 6 or sometimes 7 guys, and then everybody else is in man coverage, no help over the top. They're always going to be outnumbering protection with 1 extra guy at the expense of leaving everyone out on islands. And again, Deshaun saw that, he read it, he adjusted, and his adjustment was a bullet slant to Will Fuller underneath Tyrann Mathieu, who was about 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. And again, Tyrann is supposed to be that far off. That is how you play safety in a blitz 0 look. You're not going to be up on the line of scrimmage where it just kind of becomes a foot race. Like you have to stay over the top because if the quarterback identifies it and gets the ball out quick before the rush can get there, you would rather have a DB be over the top where he can make a tackle rather than losing a foot race to Will Fuller, another guy that runs 4-2 that can then turn into an instant touchdown. So again, that's how you play safety. That's how you play slot in a blitz 0 look, is you stay way back over the top and you just kind of gamble that your rush can get there before the quarterback gets rid of the ball. Obviously, Deshaun got rid of it first. And to me, even though that is 10 yards, obviously, that Tyrann gave up, he didn't really give it up. So I understand why PFF had to credit him with giving up the catch, but I also understand why Tyrann says, in his own opinion, that he didn't really give that up because he was just doing what the defense was designed to do. And I think there's kind of a disconnect here in terms of what is a catch and what is a quote-unquote catch. And that's why what I found really interesting is when I brought this up to Ben Stockwell of like, look, some of this stuff is manufactured production that he has no chance of stopping, Ben actually had a great answer for that is, you're correct. He doesn't have any chance of doing anything about this. This was all defensive design or all offensive design, and it wasn't his fault. And that is where the grades come in. The grades are PFF's way of acknowledging that, look, sometimes a guy can be in perfect position for what his coach calls, and he's still going to get beat. And so you only have a negative grade, according to them, on plays where he was doing what the defense was supposed to be doing that should have put him in a position to succeed, and he either succeeded or failed. Those particular plays where he's in position to stop a pass and he either stops it or he gives up a catch, those are the ones that actually carry positive or negative grades. And so even though he did give up 19 catches total, only a handful of those, maybe between 6 and 9, might actually carry negative grades. And in fact, in the process of me talking to Ben, I actually brought up a screen pass to David Johnson for like 5 yards in week 1. And I said, you guys attributed this pass to Tyrann, but he was just the force player and the linebacker missed a tackle. Why was that catch counted against him? And Ben said, you know what? You're right. We do reviews constantly on these games. I'm going back to review this game right now. That's not a catch. And they actually took it off Tyrann's board. So he is no longer credited with giving up that screen to David Johnson. And he says they do this all the time. They'll go back multiple times throughout the year and re-review games to see if they screwed up or maybe if they didn't attribute a catch to him that should have been attributed. They're always kind of changing things. And also they talk to their clients, which are the teams themselves, who bring up plays and saying like, look, you guys got this one wrong. He was doing what he was supposed to do. You should not credit this to him. And they will obviously oblige and take that off. So it's kind of a fascinating look that I got behind the curtain of what's a grade mean, what is the statistics mean, and how are they different from one another? Because honestly, they kind of mean different stuff. And that brings me to the final category of the 19 catches that Tyrann supposedly gave up, and that's the 5 catches where he absolutely 100% unequivocally did not get a negative grade for them. And that's again stuff like screens. There was a 15-yarder to Stefon Diggs in the Buffalo game where he was in prevent and he just happened to be the closest guy to Stefon Diggs when he caught the ball to set up a field goal at the end of the half. That's the kind of stuff where it's like, again, look, he's the closest defender there. We have to attribute it to him, but he's not going to get a negative grade because he didn't actually give anything up. And so overall, I think the kind of fascinating part about this last week where I studied the Chiefs defense and I charted every play that Tyrann did, and I kind of compared my numbers to PFF's and I got a better understanding from PFF themselves in terms of how they grade plays, how they change grades, how the stats in some cases don't really mean anything relative to the grades. The main thing that I took away from this whole experience is that nobody's wrong and everybody's kind of right. Tyrann is correct in that he has not given up 19 catches this year, but Pro Football Focus is correct in the sense that he has been the closest defender to 19 separate catches. It's kind of two different definitions of the same thing, but you kind of get where I'm going with this. Tyrann is right, PFF is right, nobody's wrong. Truth be told, I don't think Tyrann Mathieu or PFF are ever going to agree on this issue, mainly because they're using two different definitions for the same thing. But if there's one thing that I know we can all still agree on, myself included, it's that at the end of the day, the eye in the sky does not lie. And if there's one thing that I've learned from watching every single snap that Tyrann Mathieu has taken this season, both good and bad, it's that I can still definitively say that after all these years, Tyrann Mathieu is 100% a bona fide stud. And for now, I'll leave it at that.
Darling, you send me.
Before you go, I know you're probably thinking, what the hell, Brett doesn't wear glasses, and normally you'd be correct. I don't wear glasses because I have decent genetics, thank you to my mom and dad. But these are not just any glasses. These are the Felix Gray blue light filtering glasses, and they are the sponsor of this week's show because I absolutely love them and I could not live without them. As you can imagine, I spend a lot of time in front of screens every week, whether I'm editing or doing film study or just kind of messing around on my phone. I am in front of screens all the time. And computer screens or phone screens or any kind of screen emits a very high energy blue light that has been linked to macular degeneration, disruption of sleep cycle, headaches, blurry vision, you name it. If you've ever kind of spent your time at your computer all day and then kind of stood up and realized, oh my God, I think I'm getting a migraine, that's because of the blue light. And these Felix Gray blue light glasses filter out that spectrum of blue light to kind of reduce the harmful effects of that spectrum. I personally cannot speak highly enough about them. Again, I've been using them for multiple months now, and they really do work. My sleep cycle is better. I don't notice that I get headaches as often as I used to. In fact, I can't remember the last headache that I got after an all-night editing session. It must have been 4 or 5 months ago now. So that says a lot for how effective these things have been. In fact, Felix Gray says they're 15 times more effective than other competitive brands on the market. And I believe it just because I haven't had problems since these arrived at my door. If you also have your own issues with blurry vision or headaches or disrupted sleep cycle or anything of that nature due to your own heavy screen time, again, I highly recommend you guys check these out. Link in the description below to felixgray.com. I really can't speak highly enough about them. They make a great product. You can get them in prescription or non-prescription, and there's a whole bunch of different styles, so they really are for everybody. Again, link in the description below. Check out Felix Gray. Great product. And with that being said, I am going to see you guys next week for a more traditional film room topic. I'm not 100% sure what it's going to be on yet. Maybe I'll kind of pick up where I left off on that Buddha Baker film room, because I had decent progress on that before I kind of switched topics, but at the same time, maybe I don't want to do 2 safeties in a row. I don't know. I'm kind of figuring it out. And then eventually, Thanksgiving week, I think I'm going to do another Steelers versus Ravens film room to kind of break down that rematch, because last weekend's game was just a barn burner and I loved it. So yeah, we got a lot coming up on the film room here. A lot of really good stuff. I don't know what's going to be next week, but I'm sure you guys are going to love it. So until then, later.